In one room truly motivates me. Our family has been doing philanthropy for a long time. We're the third generation of the Low family. My grandfather started philanthropy till today. The Low family has been involved in philanthropy for the past 70 years. We decided as the third generation to institutionalize this effort with Jho Low Charitable Foundation because we believe that philanthropy needs to be disruptive, it needs to be different, it needs to have a global impact.
A federal grand jury in the District of Columbia returned a superseding indictment Thursday charging a U.S. entertainer and businessman and a Malaysian national with orchestrating an unregistered back-channel campaign beginning in or about 2017 to influence the then administration of the President of the United States and the Department of Justice, both to drop the investigation of Jho Low and others in connection with the international strategic and development company known as 1MDB, and to send a Chinese dissident back to China. According to the superseding indictment, Low Take Jho, 39, also known as Jho Low, and Prakazrel Pras Michel, 48, are alleged to have conspired with Elliot Brady, Nikki Lum Davis, and others to engage in undisclosed lobbying campaigns at the direction of Low and the Vice Minister of Public Security for the People's Republic of China, respectively, both to have the 1MDB embezzlement investigation and forfeiture proceedings involving Low and others dropped and to have a Chinese dissident sent back to China. Michel and Low are also charged with conspiring to commit money laundering related to the foreign influence campaigns. Michel is also charged with witness tampering and conspiracy to make false statements to banks.
So, our dear viewers, if you have been noticing, I would like to apologize saying because our live stream for tonight has been experienced some unexpected technical difficulties, which resulted in the interruption of our previous live stream. But rest be assured for now, everything. So I would like to say once again, I am your host, David Starwatcher, from the Himalaya, Washington, D.C. farm of the new federal state of China, together with my co-host Nancy tonight. Nancy?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm your co-host Nancy from the new federal state of China with Washington, D.C. farm. I'm glad to join David tonight.
Thank you very much, and thank you for joining. Thank you for joining tonight. So we are still going to looking into the case of Jho Low and to see how does Jho Low connected not only to the CCP's unrestricted warfare against Mr. Miles Guo, but also from here, let us take a look how the CCP infiltrates the United States judicial system. Before that, we are going to look into the disclaimer. So by the requirement of the law, I am required to read this disclaimer here, that this video is for educational and informative purpose only. We are dedicated to share with you what is really happening in China and try our best to verify information used. Jointly, we fight back CCP propaganda. We highly value your independent research, critical thinking, and comments by the CCP Reality Check team. So now we move on next because we're about to really start going down the rabbit hole of Jho Low. Let's move on. So how does CCP infiltrate the United States judicial system? So let's move on to the next one to see what we are going to look in here today. So today's episode, we are going to looking into one, Mr. Miles Guo's bankruptcy case updates, and we do some recaps. Two, we are going to look into the case of Jho Low by the number of CR200068JAO, but just a little bit of saying this is the case case number that Mr. Jho Low is involved in. So before we move on, let's stay here for a moment. Let us do a quick recap and the update of Mr. Miles Guo's bankruptcy case. So a recap is the point that created a lot of discussions and, of course, a lot of saying a lot of discussion, which creates a lot of concerns, are these two. One is the conflict of interest with different, and two is different standards that have been applied onto trustees by the DOJ, the trustee office. On July the 5th, the qualified trustee, Mr. Jho Low, was withdrawn with unknown reason. Later, it is being revealed by the unprecedented withdrawal process, which has triggered a lot of speculations, saying that the recent hired new employee from Mr. Jho Low's company were once employed by Mr. Mao Guo's son's company. And also, we reviewed in the last two episodes, CCP, that the Ligue des Ponts has multiple levels of direct conflict of interest to the trustee's appointment. So Mr. Mao Guo files a motion on July to remove Ligue des Ponts trustee appointment. And the court is subjected by this point to make a decision on August the 1st to see if Mr. Ligue des Ponts is a qualified trustee. And also in last episode, we have the details not being seen in the mainstream media in the case of George Higginbotham. We also reviewed the case on how the CCP had influenced the United States Department of Justice and its officials to be a part of the unrestricted lawfare against Mr. Mao Guo. And we also point out that one of the key figures who was involved is Jho Low. So we are now move on to look into Mr. Jho Low and his involvement. So now let's do a quick recap before we move on. On last episode, we talked about the case of George Higginbotham. And we saw that Jho Low is involved in the Higginbotham's case. So we might wonder, how does Jho Low involved in the CCP's unrestricted lawfare against Mr. Mao Guo? So we move on to take a look. So it is on October 2017. Jho Low, as here is referred to as co-conspirator B, has directed $41 million to Higginbotham's escrow account, and these funds were then transferred to co-conspirator A, of whom later known as Pras, an American rap singer, to transfer into Pras' hand. Then Pras, acting as an agent unregistered, to lobby for foreign national ones. And in Higginbotham's case, the foreign national one is referred to as Mr. Mao Guo. Pras, acting as an agent unregistered, to lobby Mr. Mao Guo's deportation on behalf of the CCP. So Nancy, why would Jho Low provide funds as reviewed in this case? And how does this connect it to the CCP? Would you explain to the audiences?
Yeah, David, this is a really good question, right? As we all know, Mr. Mao Guo is the #1 threat to the CCP regime. Why would Jho Low provide funds to lobby U.S. officials to have Mr. Mao Guo removed from U.S. and returned back to China? Obviously, Jho Low is funded by the CCP regime to have Mr. Mao Guo removed from U.S. and sent back to communist China. We can only track from Jho Low's connection with one MBD through mainstream media, right, as we see. But Mr. Mao Guo has no conflict with the one MBD or Malaysia government. Here we can track from the Higginbotham case, the Jho Low's obvious connection to the CCP regime.
Nancy. So before we move on, I would like to say I would like you to tell us all of us again that Mr. Mao's squad does not have a conflict of interest with Malaysia and does not have conflict of interest with the 1MDB directly, right?
Right.
Well, that's something very well, because the reason I'm asking this question is because we have to bear all these little details in mind, and they might hidden a lot of information in here. So we are going to looking into the next one to take a look on Jho Low's indictment. We move on. Just move master slide so that our audiences. Yeah, thank you very much. Next one. We need to take a look at the indictment. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. So this is actually the indictment of Jho Low based on the 1MDB case, and is well known by the public. The case number here is CR1800538. So this is the indictment happened, and it comes from the United States District Court, Eastern District of New York. The reason is because that he was connected to the 1MDB case and also known as the 1MDB scandal. Jho Low, as being written here, that said that Jho Low was involved in the creation of 1MDB. So we move on to take a look at the overview indictment to see what happened. Part. Take a look at the circled part. It shows that Jho Low was involved in the money laundering. So that is what the public has already known. Saying that, oh, public maybe is thinking, oh, that is maybe related to the money laundering case, but how does it connect it? Let's move on and continue down the road to let's see what happened. Let's continue here for a second. This is a picture of Mr. Jho Low's super yacht, which was marketed at a price of $200 million. In addition to this super yacht, Mr. Jho Low is accused of splashing his money on all manner of lavish purchases over the years, including properties around the world, and also bought Picasso and Basquiat's work. I mean, basically, which is the oil paintings, and helping to fund this Scorsese's 2013 movie, The Wolf of Wall Street. The charges Mr. Jho Low has to pay for the illegal gain, that charges make Mr. Low the illegal gains he made, and the criminal doing are as the following. Let's move on to take a look at what he needed to pay. The first charge here, the United States indicted him for is for bribery. And this kind of bribery is based on his violation of FCPA. The FCPA is the Foreign Corrupt Practice Act. Move on to the next one. We will take a look at the second charge. The second charge for Jho Low is circumventing the internal accounting controls, which is also a charge that violated the FCPA, which is the Foreign Corrupt Practice Act. And then we move on to the next one. This is the last charge he's being charged of. The last charge he is being charged of is for money laundering. Jho Low involved in money laundering far earlier than 2017's involvement of both the 1MDB scandal and the lobbying for Mr. Mao's squad's deportation on the CCP's behalf. So we now see there's actually a pattern of behavior that is being shown in this indictment document. So now let's take a look on what Jho Low's status is now. So let's move on. Now, this is actually an information sheet, as if you look it closely to the right side part, Mr. Jho's warrant is being issued. Well, at this point, however, Jho Low is still at large. And then let's continue to take a look, because there's something very, very important saying that Mr. Jho Low had been attempting to try to settle the case by offering about 337 million of US dollars. He tried to settle the case, rejected his offer. So, Nancy, up to this point, I wonder, where's Jho Low? Probably a lot of audiences also wonder, where's Jho Low?
Yeah.
Where is he?
Curious about it as well, right? So U.S. is issued a warrant to have him arrested, and he definitely cannot up in U.S. And then the unions of U.S. partner countries, and then Malaysia rejected his offer to settle it, and definitely he cannot show up in Malaysia as well. So I just out of curiosity searched through the Wikipedia, and it was surprising to see that Wikipedia says Low is believed to be residing secretly somewhere in the communist China. These also provide another layer of evidence Low is somehow connected to the CCP regime. And Mr. Mao has revealed many times in his grand broadcasting that Low's involvement to be a part of the unrestricted lawfare against Mr. Mao. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So that seems like, so it seems Jho Low is indeed has a lot of connection with the CCP regime. Well, let's just continue. We have to continue to take a look. So, because in here, as Nancy already told us, by the way, thank you, Nancy, for telling us all these things, saying Nancy, you said it right. Mr. Moscow already said Jho Low is a part of the CCP's unrestricted lawfare against Mr. Moscow. We already showed Jho Low's connection to the case of George Higginbotham in the last episode, and we also showed you by previous slide that Jho Low, I mean, it's very strangely, not say strangely or something, but Jho Low as a Malaysian, and supposed to be a Malaysian, and he's supposed to be a manager of the, he's supposed to be the founder of the 1MDB, through what has he had a lot of connections in the lobbying against, on behalf of the CCP. I mean, why is he involved in the lobby on behalf of the CCP's attempted deportation of Mr. Moscow? So we will be reviewing all these to you in the next episode, saying we are going to looking into the case of Nicky Lam Davis, because Nicky Lam Davis has already pleaded guilty. And here again, we will see Jho Low's involvement in the case of Nicky Lam Davis. Now let's move on to take a little bit into the case of Nicky Lam Davis. In here, this is a snapshot of Jho Low's, which is the snapshot of Nicky Lam Davis' memorandum of plea. So this snapshot shows Jho Low's involvement. That shows Jho Low's involvement in the lobbying is not and of course some of the illegal financial activities are not just limited to the 1MDB. This involved in the Nicky Lam Davis case as well. We saw here in the little red circle, foreign national mean A. So, and we also see something very interesting. It's called the PRC Minister A. So why was Jho Low listed again with the CCP's official in the case? let's continue to see, because there's something even more than that happening. Let's stay here for a second. We also say in the details of this little case here, say co-conspirator B is, so now the which is being labeled as defendant in the snapshot. So why did Jho Low have Nikki Lam Davis, someone who met with the CCP's official, to be Jho Low? 1MDB's illegal lobbying is concurrent with the CCP's lobbying of its attempted deportation of Mr. Miles Guo from the United States. So please stay tuned for the next episode of the CCP Reality Check special series, because we are about to review them. So Nat, before we end, let's move on continually to see the last slide to take a look once again all these connections. So we review the details of the cases that is not shown on the mainstream media. And we also show that the CCP had influenced the United States Department of Justice officials to be a part of this unrestricted lawfare against Mr. Miles Guo. So Nancy, before we end, you certainly have a lot of questions in your mind regarding Jho Low's involvement in these lobbying attempts, right?
Yeah, I'm surprised to see that the Jho Low's connections to the victim George Hagenbessen's case, right? And then by taking a quick snapshot for the next episode, Lakeland Davis' case, you can already see his name is showing up again. Both cases, nothing to do with not only one MBD case that we only shown in the mainstream, but also paid millions of dollars to send Mr. Miles Guo back to China, right? Why Jho Low is connected, and now he is hiding somewhere in the communist China. Yeah, where's the?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, where is Jordan? And the problem is, why was he hiding in the communist China? And why was he involved in all these cases? I mean, say which related to the CCP's unrestricted lawfare against Mr. Miles Guo and the CCP's lobbying attempt of trying to deporting Mr. Miles Guo from the United States. Stay tuned for the next episode on the case of Nikki Lam Davis, because there will be more coming out of this. We will be seeing more details on how the CCP infiltrates the United States judicial system. Thank you very much for joining me and Nancy for tonight's episode. Again, my apologies for the technical difficulties we've already met. We will see you next time in the special series. Have a good night.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Bye.